All right, now we're going to do that impossible thing of reporting back. Very carefully not talking about harvesting. We're not doing that. But somehow trying to get maybe a feeling or a sense of or a smell or a frequency from the workshop tracks. And the invitation is for 5 minutes. And the prompt was, what did you notice? What did you learn today? What shifts might you have sensed? And do you want to start with the AI in Education workshop?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm taking the risk that no one is listening to me. And maybe that's okay. Can you see me? And the baby. Right. What did I notice? What shifted? Do I need to say anything? Actually, that moved me when I listened to you. Both now, when you laughed, and a minute ago when you were doing music. And the question in my head was, how did you know how to do it? Because my eyes were closed, and me and the baby were feeling it. And my question was, how did you know how to do it? And yeah, that question is very relevant in the question of education and AI. It's kind of similar kind of knowing that she leans her head like this because she wants milk. How does she know that she has to do this to get milk? I don't know. So what was happening is that we were kind of perhaps questioning. Well, let me first tell you, actually, on my side, very personally, what shifted, what I noticed. I think that's more interesting than giving you a summarization of the track, because what shifted was between the two sessions, and everyone who was in both sessions really could, in their body, they could feel that something changed, something was very, very different. And I have no idea what it was. Was it the lunch in our bodies, or a different constellation of people? Our thinking that this must go somewhere, or perhaps we had, I don't know, but the feeling was very different. So that was something I noticed, that also what shifted. And in that, even that itself was kind of educational moment, which was shared during the second bit. And I guess the biggest thing that was something that I learned was, how am I with that shifting or shifting of the ground or moving of the ground that I felt? I think she's okay. Okay, Tim's for the rescue. Cool. Now everyone's looking at Tim. Yeah, how can we hold the fact that things are shifting, and how can we be with all of that? And in the sessions there were very big things mentioned, like not knowing where the AI is going, or the end was mentioned, and big things. So and fear, and also that is darkness a bad thing, and and then, yeah, I don't know, for me the learning was that, how do I get better at being with the ground shifting and not knowing where education and AI is going? even though I sometimes fall into this, oh, I have a brilliant idea of what it is, and they're brilliant ideas and brilliant things were coming, and can I sometimes drop them and not know where it's going, and still have a breath, stop to breathe, and feel the feelings and the emotions that come with it. Yeah, me and Tim, we're thinking that the first bit of the session we're asking the big questions, and the second one we're thinking, what is the work? Where are we going? What are we going to do? And it didn't go as planned. And and I am grateful for that, because without that, if it had gone according to my plan, I don't think I would have had this learning. And I think that was the biggest education for me. So yeah, thank you for being there and learning from each other. That was lovely.
Thank you. Thank you. Who's next? Samantha, are you speaking for the... Okay, you go for it. That's good. So this is the reimagining ourselves and our culture.
So
Small
what
topic.
did we notice and what shifted?
What did you learn?
What did I learn?
What did you notice? And what shifts did you sense today, if any?
So, I learned a ton because I got to collaborate with Olivier and Jenny and with the field. What did we learn? I can't answer that for the collective, but I think we inquired into what is culture, what is self, what is the relationship between them, with an emphasis on the relationship and the qualities of relationship that arise between individuals and the contexts that we switch through all the time. In the morning we talked about, we explored a context, we explored deepening intimacy and what that does to create a culture in a micro way. And then on top of that, we layered two different questions, one of which was around cultures that feel really liberating, and one of which was around cultures that feel entrapping, and how we relate to that. Which is a kind of a contextual question at the root of design, in a way. And in the afternoon, we brought in a story from an Indigenous teacher of mine about that tells the story of their 10,000-year lineage that they remember orally, and then kind of plants the seeds. Well, we remember that. If you're here, that also happened to you. And given that, what stories and seeds would you like to carry that could get you through what's coming? And we did a process to explore that. I'm abouting right now, but I think I learned that those things are interesting things to do. One thing that was spoken is that it's very surreal to do such things in a basement room with no rooms, with no windows. I think that's a useful harvest. And what I felt shifted really profoundly was the imaginal fabric of how we're thinking about self-culture, the relationship between them, and the relationship between culture and deep time. And that a field can be generated that expands our thinking about culture in time, which I think is a really important, I personally think is a design, it's an invitation to qualities of imagination that could incentivize different questions and different processes and different incentive structures for why we do anything. So I think that was pretty effective, and I'm excited about that. Thank you.
Oh. Cool. So, Erika, from Regenerative Economics, right? Or business, or I don't know how you framed it. Good, economics, very specific. Go ahead.
Hi, guys. What a different viewpoint from here. And going after Samantha Sweetwater, my husband thinks she should be president of the world, so no pressure now. So we were in the Regenerative Economics group, and we got the question how long we had been working together and doing this. And we had 30 minutes in the sauna yesterday. And then for us, it was learning how to kind of go with the flow and have ideas and then see how it evolved over time together with the group, which was super exciting. We did embodied practices and conversation, so we tried to keep the rational mind out of it as much as possible. And in the first session in the morning, we did time travel. First, a year from now, coming back to waves, and then 5 years from now, coming back to waves, meeting each other in a new situation. So we're boosting ticket sales. Now everybody knows they're going to go back for 25 years in a row. But we also we looked at how do we want the future to be in the context of ourselves, but also the system and outside of ourselves. And there was a lot of energy and expansiveness and potential and smiles in the room. And then we tried to backtrack and see, okay, what do we need to do to get there? And we grouped around clusters where we might be working, like education or food system and business. And then the energy in the room got a little bit stuck. We got boxed in, energy dropped. After lunch, we did a similar exercise. We were time traveling again. This time, we were focusing more on the self, time traveling with ourselves, and exploring how we want to show up in the world. And again, when we just explored how we want to show up, there was a lot of potential and energy and expansiveness. And then when we asked ourselves, okay, when we look back in how we want to take that out in the world, what do we need to do? We again got stuck, and mind came in, and energy in the room dropped. So we decided to take some time to just notice that and the difference and what that meant for all of us. And something that came up was that the economy, the word in itself, means something about householding of resources or householding resources in your household. I'm not exactly sure. And playing with this, playing with energies and playing with what we can do and playing with different presences, I think that was what we could distill from it. That when we go from this outside system and we kind of take it back to ourselves, and that's where the potential lies. That's where we have energy. And yeah, I think that's where I will conclude. It was a lovely, fun experience. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Impeccable timing. The fourth and final workshop was on institutional innovation and collective intelligence. And you kept boosting the second session, and then I didn't go to the second session, so now I'm really curious what you have to say for yourself.
What would you like, a summary?
I would, well, not so much a summary as the prompts that I've been giving is, what did you notice? What did you learn? What, if anything, did shift? Or what shifts did you sense? So, but you can also do a summary. And more.
Well, for those that weren't there, a very, very quick summary. So we spoke about institutional innovation and collective intelligence. We started with trying to understand how institutions fail, where, why, how it feels for institutions to fail, and tried to sort of elicit a sort of a gestalt of the diagnosis of that problem. Enter collective intelligence. We're sort of not positing it as a solution, but really as a sort of a way to potentially begin to shift the sort of rigor mortis of institutions. We also made a distinction, I think, that's important to tease out between innovation and design, so not just doing things within institutions, but sort of designing them from scratch and what role collective intelligence can play there. That was the morning session, and I think in that, really off the top of my head here, trying to think about what came up. I think I overheard one conversation which I think was the most profound, I think, for me, which was that an institution that can mean security, familiarity, and safety in a high-trust culture can be the same institution that is a purveyor of untold violence in another. And how when we're having conversations across national boundaries and cultures about how we reform institutions, sometimes if we're not naming those contextual differences, we're working at cross purposes. So assuming there's a universal conversation about institutional dynamics and institutional design is a mistake. I think that was a really interesting, not necessarily a lesson, but just something really good to be reminded of. Am I doing too long?
No, go ahead. You have a timer even in front of you.
In the second session, we went into a design spirit. So we tried to give a very, for those that were there, very bare bones framework, sort of light enough to play with, basically, collapsing all the many, many dimensions that you can design for collective intelligence into just 3: people, data, process. Really horrendously collapsing. Something trying to design an institutional innovation in 25 minutes was it was a great design challenge for us as facilitators to think, how do we take this huge field? The last systematic review, sorry, people have heard this twice if you came to the workshop. The last systematic review written on collective intelligence frameworks reviewed just 9,500 of them out there. So there's really this framework overload. So trying to then look at that and condense it down, it was quite fun for us to realize what we're getting rid of. And we had I think the reflection at the end, we had this sharing session about what tensions came up. And whilst there were some really interesting tensions about collective intelligence itself, especially, sure, we can create these cool methods that institutions can use. Are they actually going to do anything about it? And I think there's a sense in the room that probably not, actually. And sometimes looking at the institution as the site or the locus of change misses a trick. The innovation happens at the edges. The institutions seek to preserve themselves. I think that was an interesting thing. But apart from that tension, the meta tension that came up was that we designed a process. We were asking people to design a collective intelligence process by going through a process of collective intelligence that we designed. It's quite meta. But in what we asked people to focus on, people, data, process, there's so much about collective intelligence that's not included in those dimensions. Context, diversity, trust, the list really goes on and on. We chose 3. Those choices radically shaped the kinds of institutional innovations that people came up with. And I think there's a lesson in there for us that when we hold space or when we design process, we shape what outcomes are possible. And what the reflection that Lucas and I were just kind of leaning into briefly was that really having a gratitude for this conference and its choices in design. So often we're up in our heads doing these kind of things, and the decision to not do that, to focus on different things, produces different results, produces different learnings, different conversations at the coffee table as well. So whilst it's fun to think about collective intelligence design, it's also really fun for the designers of these kinds of events to really reflect on what choices they're making and how they shape possibilities as well. So a thank you to Thomas and Sarah for curating an event that's held so much space for difference in that respect. Yeah.
Thank you. So I would like to invite Dave and Nora up on stage, and I had this notion of inviting a riff on what we've heard. If there are patterns or things or learnings or shifts even, maybe not shifts, who knows?
We could have really done with a 15-minute summary of each in order to do this, you understand, all right?
I do.
So we'll probably have to riff on the subject rather than the report. Don't know, Nora, do you want to start? This is please start, Nora, do you understand?
I hear that in your voice, yeah. Well, I did my best to attend a little bit of everything, which is to say that I completely failed at attending any of all of it. And I think if I'm going to zoom out for a second, what I'm really seeing is this interest, urgency, appetite, need to figure out some way to get loose of the patterns of thinking that we've been stuck in different types of ways, whether it's through imagination, sort of trancing through things, or through various sorts of, designed dialogues, or even just sitting around thinking together. What do you think? And what do you think? And what do I think? And throwing a beanbag around and just seeing where it goes. And I didn't get to spend much time actually in the institutional one, but I peeked in a little bit. So I think it's that I'm the most curious about. And I think the content was seemingly different in each space, and yet not, as somebody who was passing through. There was a similar content of essentially we're headed for some hard times and things have to be completely reshaped, and we're in the middle of it, and we're carrying the past, and we're here on behalf of the future, and what the hell are we going to do? How should we be? How should we see? How should we talk about it? How do I feel about it? Where am I in this? So that's where I'll start. That was my initial sort of feeling. Does that feel okay to you guys who were in there, that this was something that was happening? Okay.
Okay. I think we probably play our Jekyll and Hyde thing, and I'll be the nasty one on this, all right?
Okay.
And I would say one of the common themes on this, and it's what I called this morning the IDG era. It's the assumption that if we just all think differently, the world will suddenly magically be all right. All right? And that isn't going to happen. Right? And I think we need to start to think about, would you have this conversation in the streets of, say, Tonareffel in Wales? If you tried to have this sort of conversation there, you'd probably be mugged and dead at the end of it, right? But if you don't change those street stories, you're not going to change society, right? So I think there is this danger. It's called lotus eating, if you go back to Homer. It's very easy to sit somewhere and talk about how things should be and feel really good at the end of it. But reality is it just makes you feel comfortable, right? Now, for my many and various sins, I sit on a couple of think tanks where I'm considered the optimistic one, but... That's a sort of, it's a mortal sin to go up on hope if you're a Catholic, but it doesn't require you to be optimistic, all right? So, let's throw a couple of things.
Stop.
Yeah, go on.
You just skipped over something super important.
Okay, go with it.
And I bet half the room didn't actually hear what you said.
Oh, okay, so
It's a mortal sin.
Yeah, to give up on hope.
To give up on hope in the Catholic faith. That's something I think we need to actually consider for a minute.
Okay, now I'm happy to go on that.
Yeah.
There's a really good book on, there's a couple of books I'd recommend on this, by the way. So Moltmann's original Theology of Hope, yeah? Just so you can have that, all right?
Okay.
Well, you have to remember, hope was a big theme in liberation theology in the 70s. Yeah, we had hope that we could change society. Yeah, and that was really important, right? Now, as somebody was then summoned for heresy on that subject, which is a story I told at the whiskey last night, everything on liberation theology was then suppressed. Right? We thought we were at least starting to move towards a carbon-neutral planet, and now populism is actually reversing that. In fact, it's being used against us. So I think in that circumstances, and I think the important thing in the second book, which is called Hope Without Optimism, which is by Terry, all right? A brilliant book, right? And it basically says we shouldn't be optimistic, but we've got to hope that there's some sort of solution. Now, I think that also means we've got to really actively think about where we find that solution. And the solution isn't going to come from white, middle-class Northern Europeans, nor is it going to come from some false romanticism about indigenous culture, because that isn't going to happen, all right? We're going to face sometime in the next decade 30 to 50 million people dying on a single day due to heat death, right? And the only debate we're having is where it will happen first. Right? Now, what is that going to do to the way we think about ourselves as a species? You know? And I think the key thing for me on how you manage this, and we wrote a lot of this in the European Union Field Guide on complexity, is you've got to build a system which is resilient rather than designing a solution for something you can't forecast anyway. In fact, we're now saying you can't forecast full stop. We need to, and this is using Napoleon's concept, you can't forecast the future, but you can have forethought. So shifting from foresight to forethought becomes important. So just give a couple of ideas on this. One, this is in the EU Field Guide. Increasing social networks is really important. Yeah, human-to-human empathy, I talked about that this morning, is absolutely critical. You have to be able to talk with people other than yourself, and that doesn't happen easily. Yeah? One of the ideas we've talked about in the UK, but I haven't got any traction yet, is basically reintroducing national service, which we're probably going to have to do in military terms anyway, I'm afraid, right? But actually designing it linked to free education. So if you spend 2 years doing some sort of service, which isn't necessarily military, and you do it overseas, your education is paid for because you've proved you'll contribute to society. And the goal on that is to increase people's networks and get to see other cultures. Yeah, so I think we've got to change what's called the substrate thing I talked about this morning. You've got to focus on how you change the environment so good things are easier and bad things are harder. And deciding what the good things in and designing for them is a mistake. And I'll give you one example on this. Extinction Rebellion, and this is a personal opinion, I defend it to death, was almost destroyed because they adopted holacracy. Yeah, which came out that nonsensical book, you know, what is it, Teal Organization by Lacroix? Yeah, which is kind of like one of the worst researchers' book. He ignores every fact which contradicts his thesis. In his cases, he ignores, right? That's not called research. Holacracy rewarded bureaucracy. People trying to use IT at the moment for democracy are working off an Enlightenment model of rationality, and that isn't the way it works. And to leave a theme on this, I think we need Renaissance, not Enlightenment. Yeah, the Renaissance embraced the new, but also embraced the old. And we've got to stop thinking we can design solutions and design an environment from which the solutions will emerge. All institutions of any strength evolved, they were never designed. Mm. Yeah?
So, what I was hoping you were going to say.
But you can always say it for me.
Well, I think I'll prompt you again.
Oh, God.
Maybe we can play in this together, because it's something that I think...
We have, you know, parent-child issues here. You can understand that.
Yes. You can't give up on hope, because to do so is to give up on grace.
Yeah. Oh, you wanted me to bring grace? Oh, sorry, I'm forgetting some of the stuff we talked about last night. Right, okay, cool.
It's the whiskey.
Yeah,
so,
it is actually. 2 bottles was a mistake.
But this is... That's why I took the second one home. I felt like it wasn't the right thing to do, but then I felt like it was the right thing to do. Grace, though, you see, this panel being called Transcontextual Learnings, and watching what I saw today, there's all these different pieces coming together. And I think this is something, Dave, that our work really shares, is that both of us make space for grace. And so people ask me all the time, like, how do you keep your head up? How do you get up in the morning? And the way that I do that is that I am operating in a very rigorous practice of grace. There is a lot of doing and learning and reflecting and practicing and creating the conditions and place where what I would call grace can occur.
Yeah,
And-
I think
yeah.
one thing we've also got in common is both of us have tried to create methods and organizations which are not dependent on us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? So I'm really pleased when somebody takes something, we put all our stuff in open source, all right? When somebody take it and adapt it. But I think, and grace, I mean, sorry, I'm going to get theological, it's always a danger, right? But there's a huge difference between Augustine and Pelagius, if you know your history, right? So Augustine basically says everything is God. So there we get no free will, predestination, all of that. Calvin picks up on Augustine. Pelagius basically says, kind of like we're here, we've got to trust in God, but we've got to do something. Mm. And for that, he gets declared a heretic, all right? I'm a self-confessed Pelagian these days on that thing. So I think we've got to do something, but we've got to trust that doing lots of small things will produce the big things. And that's my big, I think this is why I'm really disturbed about systems thinking starting to get dominance in government again, because that's trying to look at the thing at a macro level. And nothing will ever change if you start at a macro level. It only changes if you do thousands of little things, right? And that requires creating systems which will propagate at scale and which aren't reliant on small groups of people having goodwill. So my point on climate change, and you can join this if you want, we've got a program on that, which is to capture the stories of small sacrifices that communities make because they're needed for things that they value in that community. If enough people worry about their duck pond, politicians will worry about climate change. But if you haven't got thousands of people worrying about their duck ponds, politicians will ignore climate change.
And this thing entered the socio-cultural ideas in all the wrong ways, I'm sorry to say. It entered as, and now you have to recycle, and everything you do to recycle is going to help. But still, what was the burden was placed on the individual. Back to this isolated identification of the individual, that what you do matters. And it was a mistake.
And I think the language is also, it's why I and others now fundamentally oppose the use of the word, mental models don't exist, that's just bad science. But the use of the word mindset is a real problem. Because basically, if something doesn't work, you didn't have the right mindset. All right? So it's a way of transferring responsibility to the individual rather than the interactions between individuals and groups. And one of the key things complexity teaches us is interactions matter far more than people. Yeah? If you want to change a system, you change the interactions. So, for example, one thing which we can learn from Indigenous, which we're starting to play with, is the concept of gifting. All right, so gifting is, you don't gift to get the same gift back. It's not that this idea that there's social capital. Social capital is another one of those phrases I would ban, all right? Gifting is a gift, which means the community, if it accepts the gift, they accept you and they accept responsibility for you. There is absolutely no reason why we shouldn't have free at the point of entry healthcare and education worldwide. We just choose to ration it with money. Yeah? If you don't ration something with money, if you don't have a means, and that's the problem with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just another means of exchange. And whoever owns the means of exchange then effectively controls society. So the bond markets at the moment, so let's get on to economics, have encouraged national debt, and now the bond markets can determine politics. Yeah, so and that's going to happen with AI. I mean, all these people who keep talking about AI on democracy or AI in education, we've reduced ourselves to text processors, and actually AI will always do that better. Yeah, and anything AI can do better than humans, you probably shouldn't be doing because you should actually do more. So I think changing the way we interact, stop trying to find magic pill solutions, which is what AI is. You aren't going to, and stop calling it intelligence, it isn't, it's an artificial inference machine. Yeah, and the dependency is scary. A lot of us forecast cognitive decline. We thought it would take years. It's actually taking weeks. Yeah, if people start to depend on these things. In education, I'm quite appalled at the idea that people think giving students AI coaches to retrieve information and regurgitate it is education. And I think we probably end up going back to the Oxford system where you actually have to go in and defend the thesis in front of a tutor and have a conversation about it. Yeah, because we've reduced our society to processing text, and we think information is only text. So starting to change that would be a good start, and starting to increase the social interactions.
I had an interesting exchange with a gentleman on the stairs. You know who you are. And he said, yeah, I just look around and I can't really find anything that's not corruptible. Whether it's sports or, whatever it is, all of the institutions, the education system, the tech world, the this, the that, everywhere you look, the thing is for sale. And I guess, when we're talking about all of these things, various kinds of economies or institutions, or how we're going to imagine ourselves in relationships to our ancestors even, or education systems, or AI, in all these cases, we're still in the same, and this is the problem, one of the big problems that I see, is that we are in an ecological problem. And it's the ecology of these various institutions that are interdependent and have many of the same patterns that the meadow has of interrelational process and us within it, except that that ecology is in defiance of the other ecology and is absorbing it. So how then, the question of, we're in an ecology of issues. And this is why it's going to take ecological understanding of movement. This is why neo-colonial thinking is not going to get us out of this, because that's what's perpetuating
this is where I can get pessimistic, and I don't want to, all right? But if you look at the history of humanity, it was the plague which actually changed society. All right? Now, we are going to get a biological plague sometime in the next 5 years because things are thawing out in Siberia, to which we got no natural resistance and which we haven't got antibiotics anymore. Yeah, I talked about mass heat death. We are going to see, if you want to get quasi-mystical about this, Gaia has decided she's had enough of us and is going to do some culling, all right? So the trouble is, society has historically only changed as a result of a catastrophe. All right? And the thing I want to do, that's why I want to do the Children of the World project. I want every child gathering stories, because young people have, they're not set in their ways yet, and actually they have more influence over adults than adults do. We did a big program on obesity, which was funded by Victoria's Secrets, which I always find somewhat ironic, right? Everything in Ohio is funded by Victoria's Secrets. You get used to it, all right? But what we did is we used children as journalists onto adult obesity. And the goal was to change the children's habits. Now, that was using a principle called obliquity. We got the children to investigate a problem rather than trying to educate them, in order not to be obese. But the fascinating thing is then their adults did change their behavior because their children started to take responsibility for their diet and they listened, right? So I think, and if you don't know, the great thing Wales did, we have the Senedd, which is our parliament, is we passed the Future Generations Act. Don't get me into the first commissioner, I'll do that over another drink. But the concept is the Senedd cannot pass legislation which actually damages future generations. And we've actually stopped motorways on that basis and done all sorts of things. So there are things you can start to do, but you've got to find ways to do them at huge scale. And to me, the school system is the way to do that. That's a universal, Education is there. People in there are the most flexible. We can start to use the schools in terms of education. That's my mission. That's my hope. That's what I wanted my legacy to be, all right, to have set that up. And there are other initiatives as well people can think about. But we've got to start to change, to create things which scale quickly, which will produce unexpected results. The other thing is, and this is a key principle on technology at the moment, the biological principle of acceptation. Right? So if you look, most of the major changes in evolution happened when something got repurposed. So dinosaurs' feathers evolved for sexual display, but then they exapt for flight. Right? The cerebellum evolved to manipulate muscles in fingers. It exapts in humans to manage grammar. Right? Grammar's just too sophisticated to evolve in a linear way. Microwave ovens came when somebody noticed, realized the significance of a chocolate bar melting in their pocket when they were maintaining a radar. Yeah? So we've got to start to think, and this is something else we're talking about with University College San Diego, and we're really open to talking about more people. We've got to find ways in which we can find existing technologies and people capability and repurpose them very quickly for things like climate change.
And those maneuvers will appear non-correlative.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, and this is, I think, the big excitement. This is a realm of possibility that's just waiting.
And it relates to what we might talk about last night when we talked about this, which is abduction.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to let the room in.
All
now,
right, sorry,
so-
we'll stop then.
Yeah,
Stop there, yes, please.
But just hint,
Yeah.
we might be able to talk about abduction if you ask the right question, right?
yeah. We're waiting for the right question.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, so we did want to let the room in. You are the room. And
Was that the right question?
Yeah, don't.
I would love to hear reactions, reflections, questions, comments. I think I will see two things. One is there's a lot of us. Be mindful of that. The second thing is if you are very comfortable speaking and you've spoken before, maybe hold back a little bit. And if you haven't spoken yet and you feel a trepidation, that's fine.
And
Maybe
if you
speak anyway.
can't get your voice in, put it into the sense maker thing they showed you yesterday. Capture it as a story.
And the sense maker will come up right after this, so it's all almost designed. Planned. Sorry, what am I
Good.
supposed to call it? Co-evolving, thank you.
Co-evolving.
I'm repurposing it.
Exactly. And you have the microphones in front of you. They actually work. So if you press the button, you can talk into them, and everybody will hear, including the people online. And then you press the button again, and they go silent. Please. Yes.
I'll try the microphone.
It works.
Is that okay? I just wanted to link two things, maybe more than two things that I think you said, and I just hope that you could unpack them. One was that we are here for, We're here on behalf of the future. And then another one was the Renaissance was interested in the old as well as the new, which connected to something I heard in one of the other groups about, institutions that are going through transformation should decide what they're going to change, but also what they preserve. And then we got to the sort of Jesuitical, give me a child until the age of 17, and they're mine for life, and they'll bring
I
about
was a
better
Jesuit
future.
briefly, so I should be careful here, right? But,
I like to think that I'll be part of the future as well. When I'm 75, the world's going to be possibly quite a horrible place. I hope I'll still be part of making it better. I have this hope that as we all age, we're all going to keep building this society. And I just wondered how you see this work of bringing in the old, bringing in the new, becoming old, keeping on. How do we are we able to keep creating new things as we age and as society, the old structures of our society age? Can we keep rebirthing ourselves within it as we physically become older.
I'll just say something brief, and then I'll give it to you because there's a lot of that Jesuit stuff that's yours.
I could have been a Dominican, but...
So, I really hope that we don't suffer any more decades, years, moments, seminars of innovation and creativity. Because those things have been a disaster. So one of the spaces that can get really twisted up is this idea of we have to imagine a new way of living, but the imagination is sourcing from existing experiences. And so we have, what we're looking at right now in 25 is several decades of conferences that both of us have been to and several of you have been to, where this call for innovation and creativity has produced brand new shiny words for the same old thing. And it comes in slightly different shapes and sizes, but it's really answering to the same set of addictive processes in existing systems. And so we have to be super careful that if we are asking the question that you're asking, which is a good question, that we don't slide there. And it's the vigilance that it takes to catch yourself when you think, oh, this is a clever idea. This is going to be the new social technology. And then you think, wait a minute, do we need another social technology? Because actually, maybe those are part of the problem. So where are these ghosts lurking that have the same principles and familiar aspects, appetites? What is it, and when is it something new? And can you tell the difference?
Okay, so let me throw out a couple of examples, all right? One is Wikipedia. Wikipedia is governed indirectly, not directly. It has what are called enabling constraints. So the only rules are rules about behavior. Yeah, so I actually have some really good friends on the far right in the US because they know the rules and they play by them, so we can get reasonable articles out, right? And it's not dealt with directly. Nobody adjudicates the content. It's human actors having to work together within a constraint of behavior. Right? And I say, with famous compromise, Derry for the city, Londonderry for the county, and there's lots of others, right? So this is what I'm talking about. The Future Generations Act, which is now being looked at by other European countries, is a change in the rules about interaction. It's not a solution, right? So changing the rules and changing the interactions is the most likely method. Yeah? In that context, education has lost generalists. I designed a whole master MBA in which everybody, you come on it, and for 2 years you would do the university's courses to retrain people who, say, hadn't done maths or hadn't done biology or hadn't done. So those basic courses, and then at the end of it, you'd integrate all of that knowledge in a thesis, because we've lost generalists.
But when you say we have to change the interactions, what you're not saying is we have to change the script.
No, because the script will emerge from the change of the interactions, and that's key.
That's right, because it's not that difficult to teach people new words and have them say all the same things with them. So it's very important to
I think everybody should start to understand emergence, but it's key. Now, another example, let's take the Renaissance thing, all right? So I've done a lot of work with Indigenous Australians over the years. Right? My first, most formative experience was when a mine security guard literally blasted the head off an Indigenous person next to me with a shotgun. And I went to the police and they said, it's only an abo. If you don't know the history of Indigenous Australia, you need to read it. They weren't classified as human beings till the 1960s. They were classified as flora and fauna. Right? Oh yeah, no, I can tell you lots of stories about that. You ever gone with an indigenous group on a cold burn, and I still don't know how they do it, but they can burn shrubbery cold. That's a technology we've lost, but we desperately need. At the same time, we've now started to identify bacteria which can actually eat plastics. Yeah, and we're now way past the point where actually we're not going to have to geo-re-engineer. We know we're going to have to geo-re-engineer. The danger is somebody like Musk decides he will do it, rather than some sort of control. So there's this mixture of, and my big point, and I get really annoyed at indigenous people being forced into a Western characteristic of wisdom. That's why I don't use the word. They're very scientific in what they do. And there's the stuff we can learn from on that, but then we have to learn how we apply it in agricultural practice. But, you know, herbal leys, farmers are suddenly realizing herbal leys are more economic, all right, than actually fertilizer. Yeah, cows and, you know, lambs in the UK now are born later because it turns out to be cheaper. All right, so there's a mixture of old and new, which is why I said Renaissance. But we keep thinking we can redesign society, which was the Enlightenment myth. And if you want the worst example of the result of that, it's the American Constitution. Yeah, look what that did. Yeah, sorry, I'm just being deliberately provocative now. Yeah.
Good. Let's open it up again. Please.
Hello, yes, this one works. My question is a quick one, and I'm starting with the assumption that you know this concept. The concept is sortition. What do you think about sortition as a way of organizing? Yeah.
This is a constant fight between Simon Wardley and myself, and I'm trying to get him to realize he's wrong, right? Sortition, the problem with sortition is, first of all, it's too easy to manipulate.
You probably should say what it is.
Okay, so sortition is effectively government is random. You pick your members of parliament at random from the population. Yeah? Yeah, I mean, it's probably as good as anything we do at the moment, but it doesn't change the underlying principle, all right? I actually think, I mean, one of the things we're now looking at as an alternative on citizen assemblies, I mean, one is swarming behavior of bees. So we've now just launched this. I'll be talking about it on Tuesday. We can actually involve the whole of a country through its young people in a single day in multiple iterations around a subject. Because that's how bees find an optimal space. They go backwards and forwards at a micro level. None of them know the whole. In fact, generally, anybody who used the words holistic should be taken out and shot for the sake of humanity. Because for a start, you can't think holistically, and if you try to, you distort the system based on your view of what it should be. Yeah, so you miss things you need to know. So, yeah, I think we need to rethink the way we engage people, and we need to engage more people, not just have a different way of selecting less. Yeah. But, oh, and by the way, on Citizen Assembly, you can select by identity. So this group may be diverse, but it's not diverse in terms of identity. And we need to start selecting. It's one of the other things we've been working on is how do you measure identity so you can actually select for identity diversity, which is not to do with gender or race or anything like that. It's attitudes. Yeah.
I would like to say on behalf of Waves that the opinions of the speakers are not. I have a sense that maybe we take a couple of voices and then we can work
play
off
with
of
it.
that.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, please.
Sorry, it was impressive, the sound. So I was just wondering about the practical way you handle this dialogue, because I noticed that you interrupted your partner, Nora, a lot. And I was wondering, I myself interrupt a lot people, and I noticed it during this event, that when we have pair discussions, it was really hard for me when I'm enthusiastic to not stop the other person speaking. So how do you handle the situation when you're the person interrupting? How do you prevent yourself and leave space? And for the other participant, how do you keep your ground? And how do you speak in in an atmosphere where you feel that sometimes you are a bit repressed, or you are someone who takes time to think and need that space to express yourself?
So
I think you go first.
the thing is that I first have to ask, are you saying that I interrupted Dave a lot? Because I know that I did. But Dave knows that I love him.
And I can interrupt it.
And if I don't interrupt, he just keeps going. And he knows that, and I know that. So, you know, this is the problem with looking at rules for communication instead of the relationship. And I think you can probably all feel in this room that Dave wasn't offended when I interrupted him.
I just went away and cried quietly in a corner. I mean, I want you to... Okay,
go ahead.
Go on.
No, really.
Two things. One is...
It's your turn.
No,
I don't want to silence you.
If you put yourself forward as a speaker, then you deserve everything you get. Sorry, if you put yourself forward as an authority, then your authority will be challenged, you'll be interrupted, you have to learn to cope with it, right? That's life. I almost got divorced because I didn't tell my wife about the family habit of tearing people's ideas apart for fun. It's actually a Celtic habit. We do it, all right? It's kind of like, you know, put an idea forward, let's all beat everybody up for about an hour. You learn more through argument than you do by consensus. Consensus destroys novelty, right? You can actually, we have a thing called a triopticon, which I'll happily send you data on. It has 3 speakers. What happens, so let's give an academic example. You have 3 professors, they each bring 7 master's students. This is when we're doing transdisciplinary stuff. Professor 1 speaks, professors 2 and 3 respond, nobody's allowed to have a conversation. Yeah? Then each one from each of the professors' group goes away in a group of 3 and has a conversation. They come back and one of the 3 sits in a circle with the others and talks about what they've learned. We repeat twice more. And then the 7 groups of 3 become 3 groups of 7 and they do the integration. Right? The professors only get to speak once and respond twice. And we use more effectively the more junior people to do the integration. Now that's a process, and this is the point and this is the point Nora and I both have done in our work. You don't tell people how they should behave. You will never see either of us talk about ideal behavior. We've both created processes which are more likely to generate that behavior. So that if you want to actually hear voices in a way, a triopticon is a formal process which ritualizes that exchange in the way you do it. Ritual dissent, which is another one, is you present your ideas to a group, you then put on a mask, and the group, and that's critical, the group is then instructed to tear your ideas apart. Yeah, and Canadians are the worst at this, by the way, because they're so polite normally. When you legitimize it, they can really go for you, all right? But it's done to groups in parallel and repeated basis. So it's process, yeah, that we need to focus. It's not about telling people how they should behave, and this is what institutions have traditionally done. It's creating processes which are more likely to generate that behavior.
The question of culture is really important in this too. My first husband was a guy from New York, and I'm from California.
Hey.
What could go wrong? So it's a thing, you know, on the East Coast, as it is in some other cultures as well, that the way that you show that you're paying attention and that you're engaged in the conversation is by interrupting. Mm-hmm. That's how you show you're in, okay? But I'm from California. And in California, you wouldn't know it from this conversation, but probably from the conversation with Vanessa, that the way that you show that you're listening is that you stop and you consider and you make a space. I'm listening to you, so there's quiet between what someone says and what the next person says. And that's how you show respect. That's how you show that you're actually considering it. So we divorced because it was impossible. I mean, I was like, you never, you're not even listening to me. You won't even let me finish my sentence. And he was like, I just said something to you and you don't even respond. I'm like, I'm thinking. And so we like, it was very difficult to undo this. And this is where you have to be really, really careful with thinking that you can actually ossify the codes of communication, because culture matters and relationship matters. And so what is possible to say is a whole different thing than what is said. Okay, you can look at a conversation, you can say, well, this is what is said and this is what happened. But what was possible in the relationship? What was possible? Okay, so when we're talking about a practice of perceiving interrelational interconnectedness, interdependence, ecological, living, moving, alive, complex systems, this is what we're talking about, is paying attention to what's happening in the relationship. And the thing is, it might not look like you think it should, right? Case in point. Right, I remember doing some, work with various groups of people working on different kinds of communication that were supposed to de-escalate responses.
Why would you do that?
I was curious what they would say.
You do it?
I was curious. But they got all mixed up because they were like, well, this is how you should say it. Mm. And then you think, yeah, but I mean, there's plenty of people that I've met who say nothing at all, and with a slight, batter of a eyelash, you have been eviscerated. There's nothing on the transcript, but the floor has been wiped with your idea. So what is nonviolent communication? I mean, I know that's a particular term, but I'm just saying this is the sort of practice of an attention to relational movement that's necessary.
It's a power play as well. That's the other trouble. I mean, you see people use that sort of, you're not mimicking my behavior as a way of silencing people. Right? And we need more dissent in society at the moment. We need more argument. We need more ideas. We need more challenge. And homogenization is the most dangerous thing out for humanity. Yeah, I mean, there's a phrase I use a lot, which is coherent heterogeneity. We need to be different and the same in different contexts. Right? And if you don't have that difference, you don't get evolution. It's called a gradient in biology. Yeah, without a gradient, evolution stops. Right? And homogenizing around a very particular North Atlantic values about how we should communicate is not going to be good for humanity.
And I think it's also, when you're with some friends, you're different than when you're with other people in your life. With some people, you're the funny one, and some people, you're the one that's learning, and some people, you're the one that's the know-it-all, and with some people, you're the one that's the cynic, and with other people, you're the one that's the woo person. Who are you? Now, in each one of those cases, it's not that you're being somehow inauthentic and a chameleon. It's that you're responding to context. You're responding to the relationship. Who can I be in this relationship? That is necessary.
I think it's respect as well. So if you, for example, if you get somebody really young comes in, you're going to listen to them without interrupting. If you've got somebody at an event like this, well, you're going to interrupt if you think it makes sense, all right? And then we can work around that. Because I mean, you and I have done this, and we said, hang on a minute, I just want to go back to that. I think trust trust is the ability to communicate in whatever's natural to you, but you have to respect the context and the person. For some people, you can't do that. Other people, you can. Yeah? But events like this, come on, guys, you came together to create a different world. We're not going to create a different world if we all use clean language. Sorry, you're going to have some bloody dirty language to change this world at the moment.
I think we have time for one last voice. Try it.
Okay. Yes, no.
No?
So I can try and...
Looks like the front row isn't working.
I'll speak loud. I find myself wishing that Vanessa was here as well. And I love... It's about foundations. So what does it mean to be a human being? And the assumptions of modernity are what are failing. And they're not the only assumptions. I'm curious about that, and you've had extensive experience with indigenous folks. They come at the world in a very different way.
So do the Finns.
Part of place,
Absolutely. All the people and all the culture of the world come at it in a different way. I wouldn't privilege anyone over another.
Absolutely. Except what I'm trying to point to,
okay, so let's deal with...
it's about the land. It's about the land relationship. It's about the more than human kin. It's those kinds of things. And I'm not erudite enough to be able to articulate it.
I can take you to some Welsh farmers who have exactly the same attitude.
My ancestors are from Scotland and Ireland. And I know that if I go back far enough, like there was that right relationship, and modernity doesn't have it. And so if we're talking about solutions, and it's still based on the broken assumptions, then it doesn't matter what brilliant ideas we come up with, it's not going to work in a good way.
Okay, firstly, I love a lot of what is in Vanessa's book, but her use of modernity is a straw man. Anything she doesn't like, she says that's modernity. All right? And that to me is problematic. I mean, she might as well say sin, and then it would be better. Modernity, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for modernity. All right? The solutions to climate change are going to come from modernity, as it's created the problems. And we've got to stop trying to privilege or romanticize things. As I say, I grew up in a farming environment. Right? The farmers I knew had a relationship with their land. That's where Cynefin comes from in Welsh. The sheep know where to go. Right? So we can't go back to a rural idyll. All cultures have that. We've got to find different solutions. And we shouldn't demonize anything. Modernity, post-modernity, God help us, meta-modernity. All right? Yeah? Yeah, all of these things are part of the cycle of humans. We can't go back. We've got to stop looking back, and we've got to stop looking forward, and we've got to deal with the present.
I'm also a farmer. Well, I was up until 3 years ago when a hurricane took me out of the game. And so I have a lived experience of land relationship, and that's not what I'm talking about here. It's underlying assumptions about what it is to be a human on this living planet.
There isn't a thing called...
I mean, you're brilliant, and I love listening to you, but there's something missing. And there's an assumption at play that's not being questioned.
Well, feel free...
And I take what you say about modernity, fair enough. A catch-all, all of that, I get that. But there's an assumption here that the people that we all are in this industrialized world is what it means to be a human. It's one iteration, and it's one that's foundationally fractured and defunct.
I think it's the wrong question. I think the question isn't what it is to be human, it's what it is to live with other people. All right? And I think the in the living planet, and one of the things we've been talking about with Tyson is a peace and reconciliation process with the planet, all right? So there's lots of things we should do here, all right? But demonizing something is not the way forward, all right? And that's my point. You've got to look at the good and you've got to look at the bad. You've got to find ways to work forward, but we've got to work with the present and we've got to work with what we are. What we are is what we have become. whether we should have or whether we shouldn't. And there aren't any assumptions. There isn't. You can't characterize all humanity or all of modernity in one way. The reality is there's a huge diversity. How do we use it?
You will have the last word, Nora. Then I will.
There's a lot of words. Meta-crisis, polycrisis, industrialism, modernity, materialism, consciousness. There's a lot of words. And I think there are a lot of words to be really careful with. I have a whole chapter in my latest book about words to be careful with. But I don't think you two are actually saying anything that's very different, and I don't think Vanessa's saying anything very different either. I mean, I think we're all sort of in recognition that there is an imprint that has gained, has been highly beneficial to some people, that has gained an ecological hold on the interinstitutional workings of a good deal of the, whatever we want to call the modern world, this place we're in, where we go to the doctor and we go to school and we are engaging with these institutions. And I think that question that we started off this session with is also fraught with the possibility of being hijacked into bullshit or not. Right? It's a really good question. Where does the new come from? How do we get out of these habits? How do we stop repeating the same behaviors, thinking that we're doing something new? And the disappointment. Oh no, we did it again. Oh no, there it is again. And it appears in, almost every new curricula you see put into a new founded school that's supposed to set the children's minds free. And then it's like, yeah, okay, but they have to take the test. And their parents want them to do well and to be able to get into university so that they can get a job, so that they can be independent, so they can support themselves, so that they can be a successful participant in the same program. And it's not easy to figure out where I begin and the assumptions of the system around me end, and where are these thoughts my thoughts? Are they coming from context? And so I think it requires, for me at least, from my experience, it requires art, it requires humor, it requires relationships that have wiggle room in them. It requires what Gio and Vanessa were talking about yesterday. Sometimes it requires 7 years of having a fight. In my case with my mom, it was 56 years that we didn't give up, right? We never gave up hope. Because somewhere in the relationship there was the possibility of grace. But there's no one way to get there. There's no one format. Like Vanessa said, there's no framework. There's no hack here. You can't crack the code. Human beings since ever have been drawing things, mandalas, labyrinths, trying to find our way. What does it mean to be alive, and where am I in life? There's nothing wrong with that. Except for when you think that the thing you drew is the it thing, is the only thing. So I guess my question that I'm working with right now as closing is just, what can we do to help nourish that possibility in ourselves and each other, to not be susceptible to falling in to one cove or another of ideas, of, you know, I'm going to find myself in Wall Street. I'm going to find myself in this new program. I'm going to find myself in my nationalism, my sports team. You know, we all have that one friend, those two friends that we know somebody who smoked cigarettes on weekends and never bothered the rest of the time. Somebody who walked out of an abusive relationship and just was like, yeah, that wasn't for me. Other people are decades in them trying to get out. That one person who walked into a cult and just walked right out the back door. Yeah, well, you know, whatever. Just didn't stick. Somebody who can somehow continue to perceive something that has more universal process in it and not get caught. And how do we nourish that in each other so we don't get grooved in to these various pockets where we can then be at war? And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you. Yeah. Is this? No? Yes.
Yes.
Lovely. Thank you. And thank you.